In 1999, an extraordinary meeting of the OAU was held in Libya, a gathering at which the establishment of an African Union, the AU, was proposed. So you see, the stated objectives of the African Union were more comprehensible in nature than those of the OAU. However, I still wonder how much closer the African Union has moved toward the realization of its objectives. In his book, I Speak of Freedom, Pan-African leader Kwame Nkrumah is emphatic when he says, Africans have indeed begun to think continentally. They realize that they have much in common, both in their past history, in their present problems, and in their future hopes. To suggest that the time is not yet ripe for considering a political union of Africa is to evade the facts and ignore realities in Africa. I don't know about you, but I dream of an Africa that recognizes Africans as equal citizens of the motherland and opens up borders and doors for its own so that Africans can pursue their dreams. Today, more Africans are pouring into China than ever before. Is there a credible reason why Africa still cannot take care of its own? Some would argue, especially those from the wealthier African nations, that opening up their borders might cause people to flood into their countries in pursuit of their riches. Poverty-stricken but skilled neighbors can lead to an influx of foreigners, fellow Africans who create competition for jobs. But does this competition have to lead to xenophobia and conflict? Instead, the opening up of borders can lead to an easy and quick exchange of skills, which in turn can help both wealthy and less developed nations alike. Workers from poorer countries do supply cheap labor, but they also do send earnings back to their homelands. And in time, the level of development may start to even out, benefiting all nations. I often think of the Reverend Jesse Jackson's remark, uttered when I met him some years ago when the world's headlines were on Zimbabwe's hyper-spiraling currency. He said, and I quote, "It is in Thabo Mbeki's national interest to have neighbors who are prosperous. If there is poverty and pain in Zimbabwe, they come over into South Africa and affect South Africa's economy. So Thabo Mbeki wants secure neighbors and growing neighbors. If Zimbabwe is in crisis, then South Africa does not have the market to expand. It cannot grow. So it is in Thabo Mbeki's interest, and it is in Kofi Annan's interest, and it is in the world's interest to have a secure and growing Zimbabwe," close quote. And this was in 2006. I then thought of the Greek lady who purchased a car from me when I was still selling cars. She was close to tears. She described how Africans were perishing in the Mediterranean Ocean in their hand-made boats, trying to seek greener pastures in Europe. It is incomprehensible that so many African dreams are drowning and being swallowed and being ignored. Those who make it to so-called greener pastures still face discrimination and racism. On the other hand, the Chinese, Pakistanis, and Europeans come to Africa and overnight and set up shop and thrive. For most Africans, however, such success is in other non-African territories is but a dream. African government policies make it possible for outsiders to prosper, but fellow African nationals still struggle to find a niche in other African countries. owing in part to archaic colonial statutes that turn Africans against one another. Hence, African borders are often more open to Asians and Europeans than they are to fellow Africans. Colonialists always made it easy for fellow Europeans to flood into Africa, but fiercely excluded Africans from immigrating into their own countries. Can you believe that? Especially when they had sufficient labor. Nothing has changed. This is a vestige of colonial policy, one that considers Africans incapable of creative thinking and lacking in business acumen. It has often led to a form of self-hatred instilled through generations and generations that still engenders a defeatist attitude. So how do African resources benefit the African people? Why in a continent as wealthy as Africa is there still so much toil and suffering? Even Ghana has oil. What about the discovery of gold and alluvial diamonds in Zimbabwe? What about the land issues that still haunt Africa? Is nationalization the answer? What is it that can honestly be done by us, the Africans? These and more questions run through my African state of mind. How does the United Nations relate to Africa? Is it doing enough to address African issues? Or does Africa have too many opposing voices in the assembly? It seems that there is a need for a union of Africa, a body with a strong singular voice. There is a need for Africa to become a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council with veto power and a voice in global issues. In 2011, the leader of South Africa's Pan-African Congress Party, PAC, Letlapa Mphahlele, in a parliamentary debate once declared, I quote, "The monumental failures of neo-colonial African states have provided an urgent need for African unity. These colonial backyards, falsely calling themselves independent states, must come to an end and give way to a United States of Africa. Africa is a continent in great distress, and only Africans can save Africa." Close quote. Need I say more? Poverty, disease, illiteracy, and corruption will only be reduced when African leaders become more conscientious and take greater responsibility, and when the African Union achieves certain objectives. Its objective 1 is to achieve greater unity and solidarity between African countries and the peoples of Africa, right? But how does Africa achieve greater unity given the tightly controlled borders? The attacks on fellow Africans by South African nationals and amongst Kenyans, and now the slaughtering going on in new independent South Sudan, illustrate serious internal issues. Africans see other Africans as a problem, but are seemingly little bothered by Europeans and Asians who flood into Africa. This phenomenon has diminished our power as a united continent to prosper in the fight against poverty, disease, and illiteracy. Our economics do not make sense, and neither do our artificial borders drawn up by outsiders. Wow. What we need to do is to redraw our African map with an African brush. This means our African leaders must take responsibility and do what is truly in Africa's best interest, and not their self-interest, and most certainly not in the interests of the former colonizers and imperialists. In the next video, we will continue to dive even deeper and look at how nations like China and India have managed to reduce their poverty levels while African poverty levels continue to increase. Why this means more dependence on foreign aid, which in turn means giving up more of our natural resources. In the coming videos, we will continue to decipher the role of the African Union and why now more than ever there is a need to reconfigure and redefine Africa by seeking a more perfect union of Africa from AU to UA, by flipping the script from the leaking African Union to a more solid Union of Africa. Send me your comments and your solutions to some of the many African issues. Solutions are what it will take to build and live in the Africa of our dreams. African state of mind is vibrating at a higher state of African consciousness. Imagine that. Amkanyileka ngwenya. Shoot me your comments. I look forward to hear from you. Thank you.